Hello, Math 7 Enriched. Today in class, a few of you during our hands up vote voiced that maybe we were a little fuzzy when it came to mixed numbers and proper fractions converting between fractions and decimals. But I know that you've learned it before, and I know that once you see it, you'll have every confidence in solving. So here's one way that we can practice. Follow me through the steps and jot down any questions you have as we go. First thing we're going to look at is converting improper fractions into mixed numbers. Okay, improper fractions, that's where the numerator is larger than the denominator, and our goal is to put it in proper form, mixed number form. So the first thing we're going to look at is 19 over 7. And the first thing we're going to ask ourselves is how many times does 7 go into 19? Kind of you think of 7 times 1, 7 times 2. We recall that 7 goes into 19 two whole times. So we jot that down as our whole number with how many left over? Okay, 2 times 7 is 14. From 14 to 19, there's 5 left over out of a possible 7. Okay, so you keep the denominator the same. Let's look at the next ones. 36 over 8. How many times does 8 go into 36? 4 times, with how many left over? Okay, so 4 times 8 is 32. From 32 to 36, there's 4. Okay, left over out of 8. Okay, now this is an opportunity for us to reduce that fraction. 4 over 8 is the same as 4 1/2. Okay, next example, 47 over 6. 6 goes into 47 7 times, because 6 times 7 is 42. From 42 to 47, that's a remainder of 5 out of 6. 3 goes into 25 8 times, because 3 times 8 is 24, and they give us a remainder of 1 out of 3. Do you have any questions about how to change improper fractions into mixed numbers? Jot them down. The next thing we're going to look at is converting mixed numbers into improper fractions. To do this, I like to call it the backwards C. It's not really backwards, other than the direction in which you draw it. Okay, so normally when you draw the letter C, it looks like this. This one goes from bottom to top rather than top to bottom. Okay, and the reason I do that is because it tells us the direction we're going. Okay, we're first going to start by multiplying. Okay, so from 4 to 6, we will multiply. 4 times 6 is 24, and then we get to add. 24 plus 1 is 25, and we're going to keep the same denominator. Let's look at the next one. 3 times 8 is 24, plus the 2 is 26 over 3. 9 times 1 is 9, plus 7 is 16 over 9. Okay, and lastly, and this one you gotta be careful because negatives can be tricky. I like to cover up the negative until the very end, pretend it's not there, and we'll put it back. Okay, so 5 times 3 is 15, plus 4 is 19 over 5, and now that we've changed it from mixed to improper, we can put the negative back out front. Any questions about converting mixed numbers into improper fractions? Jot down those questions now. The next thing I want to look at is converting decimals into fractions. Okay, and this is where we really got to rely on our place values. Okay, so for this, many of you probably don't need the place value chart, but it's helpful if you are stuck. Okay, if we have the decimal 0.2, okay, we know we have 0 in the ones place, our decimal 2 in the tenths place. Okay, so that is where our number ends, and that's what we're going to use as our denominator. Okay, if we're talking tenths, then our denominator should be a 10. If we're talking hundredths, then our denominator is 100. If we're talking thousandths, then our denominator is 1,000, so on and so forth. Okay, the other thing we can do, and we've already been doing this in class, so I know that you're accustomed to it, is pronouncing our number. Okay, so 0.2 can also be pronounced 2/10. And a lot of you are aware of that. So 2/10 would be 2 out of 10 or 2 over 10, which you see here simplifies to be 1/5. Okay, so if we look at a few more examples of those. Okay, we have 0.75. Okay, a lot of you recognize this decimal because it's a very common one. But another way to look at this is 75 hundredths. Okay, so that's 75 over 100. Okay, and you can think of this in a couple different ways. Okay, a lot of you are recognizing, I'm sure, that this is 3/4. Okay, but you could go ahead and you could say, oh, well, 25 goes into the numerator and the denominator, so I can divide by 25. Okay, and that will get you down to 3/4. Or if you saw that they could both be divisible by 5, and you just continue until you get it in simplest form. Okay, now the next two are slightly different in that we have a whole number involved. So the first one was a 0.75, the next one is a 3.35. Okay, so what that tells me is 3 is a whole number, and we're going to have a mixed number because of that. Okay, now if I look at the decimal part, it's the decimal that turns into a fraction. Okay, so we have 3 and 35 hundredths, so that's going to be 35 over 100. Okay, and then you just want to reduce. Okay, I noticed that the numerator ends in a 5, the denominator ends in a 0. They're both divisible by 5. Okay, 35 divided by 5 is 7, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. Okay, so we have our answer in simplest form. Similarly with number 12, okay, we're going to have a mixed number. This is 7 and 37 hundredths. And this one's nice because it cannot be reduced, so we are done. We're going to be moving on to our next topic. If you have any questions about converting decimals into fractions, jot them down now. Here we go, fractions to decimals, and I can just hear Mr. Snyder helping us out with this. Top dog in the house. Okay, what that means is the numerator always goes inside, okay, in the house, and the denominator always goes on the outside. So the top dog goes in the house. I also like to think of it as whichever number you read first is the one that goes in the house first. Okay, and it's also the one that gets typed in the calculator first. Okay, so there's a few examples here for you to look at. I think that this is one of the most common ones we see. Okay, but we also have a few more examples on the next page. Okay. So here we go. We have 2 1/6, and our goal is to convert this into a decimal. Okay, so the 2 I'm going to ignore for now because it's a whole number. It's the 1/6, the fraction that needs to be turned into a decimal. So top dog in the house, 1 goes inside, 6 is on the outside. Okay, now we got to ask ourselves, does 6 go into 1? The answer is no. Okay, it goes in 0 times. We now need to add a decimal and bring down a 0. 6 goes into 10 one time. 1 times 6, 6. Subtract, you get a remainder of 4. Bring down a 0. 6 goes into 40 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. Subtract, we get a remainder of 4. Bring down another 0. We get 40 again. 6 goes into 40 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. Remainder of 4. And you start to see that there's a pattern occurring. We're just going to continue to get it 6 each time. Okay, so this is my decimal portion. If I put it together with a 2, we end up with 2.16, where the 6 is repeating. So this is decimal form for that fraction. Lastly, we're going to change 13 7/8 into decimal form. So again, ignoring the 13 to the end, we want to deal with the 7 divided by 8. Okay, the 7/8. You notice that I think of it as dividing already. 7 divided by 8. 7 goes in the house. 8 is on the outside. Okay, 8 goes into 7 0 times. add a decimal, bring down a 0. 8 goes into 70 8 times. 8 times 8, 64. Subtract, we get a remainder of 6. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 60 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract, we get a remainder of 4. Bring down a 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. We get our remainder of 0. So the fraction, 7/8, can be converted into 0.875. Put it together with a 13, we get 13.875. Okay, I do want to note, and there was a little note on the last page, I believe. This right here. We will have access to calculators at certain parts of the school year. Okay, some days I'll ask that you do these by hand, other days you'll have your calculator with you. If you do have your calculator, it has the capability of converting fractions into decimals, decimals into fractions. All you need to press is second and then the F to D, D to F button, and we'll be exploring that more as we go. At this time, I want you to jot down any questions you may have. You may or may not see a quiz or a warm-up on this Monday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.